as the inmates are, or the inmate is trying their game, right? They might do it on first shift, then on second shift, or first shift but with a different officer, or first shift with a different medical person. Like, they switch it up because they want to see what are the various outcomes. And as they see those outcomes, then they know who to play the game with.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this topic, a lot of people here are going to relate to this. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's a good one. What happens when an inmate is able to weaponize, and we'll explain what that means, our own policy and procedures? You know, basically what's written for us to do, why we react. What happens when an inmate's able to use that for their own selfish gain. And also a good part about this dialogue is, what should we do when we feel that this is happening? Because again, guys, policy and procedure is an automatic reaction from us sometimes, which makes us sort of predictable. So how do we become unpredictable in a predictable world? And this is going to be a great dialogue. It's a very deep discussion, so it's a dialogue that we want to kind of dive into and kind of discover it along the way, because there's really no straightforward answer. It's just, let's see what we can come up with. And when I want to have these deep dialogues, I'm going to have Connie Alleyne on the show. Connie Alleyne is my forward thinker. She's my, I like to say my match, which is a step up for me, probably a step down for her. And she's laughing in the distance, guys. You can't hear her yet. Let me do my sponsors and get her right in. All right, guys. So, guys, if you haven't got a chance, please check out American Military University. If you guys are looking to go to school, get that higher level of education, bring experience into the classroom, American Military University. They've been supporting me since day one, but more importantly, they support the field of corrections staff, what we do. Also, guys, Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. Guys, they also have a YouTube channel. Check that out, because it will show you some of the technology that they use that makes it easier on all levels, not just management, but also frontline. And we also have the WRAP, WRAP, controlling combative subjects quickly and in an upright position so they can breathe, has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.O.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the WRAP restraints. Go to saferestraints.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the WRAP. Give the WRAP a call today, 800-WRAP, that's WRAP 911. If you guys are unfamiliar with the WRAP, there's a link to a video of how that works, and it's in my description as well. Okay, so let me bring on Connie Alleyne, the author of a great book called The Cave is a Cocoon, and hopefully we get a season 3. I'm not even going to joke about this wonderful podcast she does, because I think it's unfair. I don't want to talk about how she never has me on, and I'm not going to do that today. Or have I done it by saying I'm not going to do it? Either way, Connie, always a pleasure. It's been a while. How are you, beautiful?
Oh my goodness. So hi everyone. I don't know. Hopefully you guys don't take him serious, because I'm learning day by day what to take serious and what to not take serious. It's absolute pleasure.
I meant you were beautiful though, but
I appreciate that. Okay. But I don't be taking you serious.
No, but I meant it. You could take that.
Oh my God. You guys have no idea. It is such a pleasure to work with Anthony. And I don't even know why I'm saying that, but it just is. It just feels appropriate, because we work together so much, and like, people talk about our chemistry, but like, we really just have a good time talking everything corrections. I think his passion and just the way he sees things really just opens my eyes as a non-uniform person who is able to receive that they're uniform staff who, like, they're not all bad, right? Like, which is how I guess media has been trying to kind of spin things. But anyways, I am Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall. So season 3 needs to begin. It hasn't yet. And when it does, Anthony Gangi will be a part of it. I'm also the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. A lot of this stuff has just kept me busy. And like, Gangi just makes sure that I can't stray away too far from Tier Talk. So I am always here and I'm always ready. Awesome.
Sorry, guys. I'm learning how to edit. So I thought that was fun. Hey. So this is a great topic. Something that me and Connie were discussing about on my way home today. Usually our dialogue, and it was about what do you do when an inmate finds a way to weaponize policies and procedures. So right before we started the episode, what I talked about is policies and procedures. I get it. You know, they're the lifeblood of facility, and most of the time they're made on good intent. Now, unfortunately, sometimes good intent can be misused. And that's where the term weaponized comes in. So, Connie, I mean, this doesn't just affect custody. This affects any type of policy and procedure where there's a good intent that's meant to benefit the inmate in some sense, but then obviously it can be overused or misused. So, Connie, how would you define weaponized?
So I look at weaponize as that. So here's the entire policy. There may be, little addendums, amendments, little caveats to the policy that are kind of like the what ifs. Like, so in the event, blah, 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 blah. So here are the alternatives. It's almost like I view it as like a decision tree, right? Like, but except it's in written policy, right? So here's your decision tree. Here's the main topic. Here's the options that you have from that decision tree. And so in my mind, the weaponized is when the inmates understand our decision tree, right? They understand if this is a situation, here are the 10 possible things that they could do. And so when they start to not only learn the policy, but know how to use it against us, right? Know how to sort of trigger the policy, and they're kind of planning out the next steps because we only have 10 options to go to for that particular thing. And 10 might be just a lot, right? But I'm just using that as an example that the weaponizing comes when the inmates, they have enough insight into our policies to trigger the policy and what they know to be the known policy response. So here's how they should be responding if this happened. And so, for example, when we talked a little earlier, I talked about, the inmate who says chest pain, or that they hurt their head, or they have a head injury, or that they can't breathe in a facility, right? So those are things that trigger medical to immediately see that person. They're not going to get put on a waiting list. So even if what they need to be seen for is frivolous, or they're just malingering, they come to the top of the list. You have a mentally ill patient who says they're going to kill themselves immediately, right? It doesn't matter whose caseload is what. That inmate jumps the list. They go to the front of the line. They see mental health right away because we take those trigger points really seriously. And that's when I feel like they start to manipulate the various caveats and the different, exemptions to the rules in order to benefit from them.
Right. And guys, real quick, I want to mention something before we get into the dialogue a little bit. So inmates pretty much know what we do. I mean, Connie pulled out some great examples from the medical side. I would also like to add false PREA allegations could be manipulative behavior. Maybe they want an officer out of a unit. Maybe they want to manipulate a move. Bogus threats, where, again, I put a little quote in there, boy that cries wolf. We have to answer those every time. It doesn't matter, if we answered it 99 times and it's proven to be false, we have to answer it every time. I'm going to kill myself. And they're running through the procedure. And it's like, all right, here we go again. So for me, it's like, okay, so because policy and procedure tells us what we're going to do, and for the most reason, the inmates know why we're going to do it because of liability. I mean, that's pretty much what it is, guys. If we don't respond, the chance of it going to the highest level where the facility can get sued, we individually can get sued. No one's going to care about our responses yesterday. They care about right now. And the boy that cries wolf and saying, oh, well, he cries wolf all the time and there's no wolves. No one cares about that because that night there happened to be a wolf. And unfortunately, now the facility, our jobs, where it's at risk. So one of the things here is I noticed that there's a how we respond could kind of limit how predictable we are, which means when inmates pull these games, we know that we have to respond. Inmates know why we have to respond, like I just said, but I think there's some strategy in how we respond. So this is kind of a generalized discussion, but I promise you guys it's going to have value because I believe it could be applied specifically to many scenarios as based on our discussion with me and Connie before. But before we go down, let me explore something with Connie first. So Connie, you get what I'm saying about the what, the why, but the magic in the how? You think you can explain that from your perspective so to get another perspective on that?
So my perspective on that is that, let's say, for example, inmate is manipulating medical in order to get us to take an action. So I can use the way I almost went down the rabbit hole, right? Inmate says, hey, I'm trying to, I'm so distraught. I'm crying at night. Here's my situation. Can you get me moved to another area, right? I think in the moment, I didn't have the insight to even consider that this question of being moved had some secondary gain. It had something else that the inmate was angling for, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, it is, okay, so I could actually take an action to just get this inmate moved, or I can take an action that eliminates the issue, right? So maybe not move the inmate, but move the inmate's roommate or cellmate that she was complaining about, which isn't necessarily the outcome she was expecting, but it still answers the mail, right? So the boy that cried wolf still gets their, issue addressed, just not in the way that they were hoping it would be addressed. And so I think when they know that, we're going to take step A, B, C, I think we have to consider taking the A, B, C, but maybe in another direction in order to get to that same end result.
Right. Now, I was adding a comment, but we just lost it. So, right. So the how is where the magic is, right? So again, the behavior of the, what we do and why we do it, obviously predictable. Everybody knows why, but it's the how that's magical, or the how that's unique. So one of the things I want to mention right now is first we have to discover that we're being played, which means that usually doesn't come from the first attempt the inmate's making, right? Because again, we're treating everything as a real concern. Maybe this first attempt this inmate's trying to kill themselves could be a real attempt. We don't know. We haven't, seen any patterns. Same thing with a PREA allegation. Maybe it's real. We don't know. The threat, maybe it's real. We don't know. So what happens here is we go through the motions. But then eventually what happens is the inmate sees what we do during these motions, sees kind of how we react to what's happening, and then they start to think, well, wait a second, guys, if I do this, they're going to do this. So now this comes probably after the second or third attempt. So what happens here now is we start seeing the pattern. The pattern now is what kind of starts to show us, wait a second, guys. So this person has tried to take their own lives multiple times, right? But they seem to always want this as an end result. Hold on, my wife is giving me water. Now, is she giving me water because I asked her or because I told her, Connie?
Oh my gosh, she's giving you water before you ask her.
Oh.
So that while she's taking care of everything else upstairs, you're not calling her to ask her for water.
I automatically assumed she was up there watching TV and eating bonbons.
No, she's proactively giving you water.
Love you, Connie. Love you.
Oh, that's her in the background. Now go back and watch TV, sweetheart. So sorry, guys, just having some fun. So basically, what it is, and kind of what we're getting at, is that we got to look for the pattern. So basically, when we do these things, there's that same end result. That same end result. So maybe what we do after we understand what that pattern is. So maybe the fourth or sad to say, well, let's say the third or fourth time of us responding to the same incident, we need to start sitting down and strategizing and say, okay, what is this inmate really getting at? Because right now, every time this inmate manipulates this policy and procedure, we have to shut everything down. Operation closes down. Manpower gets pulled. And it becomes a lot of weight for the facility to carry, not even just on the first time, but the second time, the third time. I mean, the pattern could be the time of day, where the inmate's trying to go. So what I tend to do is, once I realize that there's a pattern and I feel that it's not so much about the actions or the behavior that they're carrying, but the motivation behind that behavior. I feel like they're trying to manipulate something. I start holding them down to specifics. So
can
like,
I add something to that?
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying about that is just really spot on, particularly as if you're someone who's observing the pattern. I think what you also want to notice is that the inmate is usually, whatever that behavior is, they're displaying it with different people to kind of see what are the different results that they're going to get. And I think that's something we should be mindful of, is that as you are a mess, come on. So as the inmates are, or the inmate is trying their game, right? They might do it on first shift, then on second shift, or first shift but with a different officer, or first shift with a different medical person. Like, they switch it up because they want to see what are the various outcomes. And as they see those outcomes, then they know who to play the game with.
Yeah, that was spot on. I actually thought you, took a pause there. I thought you had a little bit more, but that was so spot on. I forgot about that. Great point. So obviously, I remember issues where it was always the beginning of third shift. Always the beginning of third shift, because they knew that's when we were lighter, and they knew that, okay, this will cause a bit of a scramble. And you know what the funny thing is that I really believe that this person that was doing it just to annoy us, just because they had nothing better to do. And, you know, it was just a routine thing. But one of the things that, I want to continue on is the fact that once you realize that there's a pattern, all right, then what you do is you form your team. Now, you want to form your team based on all the departments that are involved. So let's just say this, an inmate that's faking suicide, because we all have to be on the same page. That's another thing. When it comes to a game being played, we all have to be on the same page, because once we create this momentum, if you have someone in from another department that doesn't know or unaware or just not on the same page, it messes up everything. Yeah. It does, because we're trying to expose a game that's really messing with the operational running of the facility. So let's talk about inmate suicides real quick, because I could see a few departments involved in that: administration, mental health, custody, medical. At least 4 departments right off the bat. Right. So what you want to do is you want to discuss a strategy, and you want to kind of, before you even go into that strategy, you got to have someone on the floor trying to get this inmate to specifics, because the problem is when the inmates play in the game, you're going to need those specifics. You need those specifics to kind of find out where you need to maneuver. Now, mind you, when you get the specifics, I'm not saying the inmate's 100% honest and is going to give you the honest specifics, but they're going to give you something that you're able to kind of figure out. Like Connie mentioned something great about an inmate that could be saying that they're being threatened because they're being threatened by some inmate in their housing unit. And back in our mind, we know that they're trying to manipulate a move because their girlfriend lives in the other unit. So what do? You switch them. You move the one that's saying that she's threatened, you move her to the one unit, and then you move the other girl to the unit that the other girl came from. So now this girl did this game, didn't get the outcome she wanted. So what's she going to do again? She's probably going to try the same game. And then what you're going to do is, you may play for a little bit, because remember, we are forced to react. So, okay, now you're threatened in this unit? Not a problem. I'll move you to another. But either way, it's getting them further from what they want, which is this. Let's say they want to be partnered up with this girl. Eventually, what's going to happen here, guys, is they start to get exhausted from it. Because again, we're reacting, so we're doing the what, and we're protecting the why, but we're able to strategize on the how we do it. So again, having those departments in line, the ones that are involved, having that discussion before you commit to anything. Because here's the key about this, Connie, this is true. So when this happens, let's say you got someone that's misusing policy and procedure. Now, here's the sad thing, guys. I've done this before, where you can protect people from being manipulated, but you have policies that are so predictable in nature that I can't protect you from that, because you're going to have to respond. So the best way we can do that is within the how, the uniqueness of how we respond. So when you have these parties at the table, you all want to be on the same page because you're going to now have to deal with that inmate. And we need to have consistency because when we come up with that destination of where we want to go, we at least approach that inmate with an outcome that we want to get to. So it kind of gives us a direction of where we need to be. But we all need to be on that same page because technically we don't know what this inmate's going to send our way. A lot of the stuff we're doing is based on strategy. So if we don't have an end game, the inmate takes us anywhere they want to go. So we need to go in and say, okay, Connie, we're going to commit to this because we know the inmate's going to do this. So let's go together. And whatever we do, we stay focused on this at all times. So I think what happens here is once we're consistent with each other, then when we go deal with the inmate and we have a game plan, it's harder for the inmate to maneuver because no matter where the inmate tries to take us, we got the destination. They're not driving the vehicle. So at the end, we bring them right back to where we need to be. But now if you don't have that strategy and you just go in just to go in, who's driving the vehicle, Connie?
The inmates driving the vehicle. But I think that's why it really matters. Like when you said bringing this one to the table, like it matters that you take an interdisciplinary approach because you need all the right people at the table and we all need to be on the same page, right? Because all he needs or she needs, the inmate, is for that one person that seems to not be on the same team, right? And they start engaging in a manner that is going to pull that person onto their team. So like, you know, I think the more that we are looking at these incidents from a more collaborative space, right? It's not, oh, you're the only one who can make the decision or I'm the only one. And I know I've seen that oftentimes, especially in mental health situations where mental health is making the decision, right? Like when we don't have custody and support of the decision that's being made, there's usually some sort of game that the inmate's able to play because we aren't all on the same page. So I think it's certainly taking an approach that prevents the inmate from being able to it takes away the wiggle room that the inmate might be looking for to kind of circumvent the process, right? And the process is what we control. And I think we just got to be mindful of that.
Right. So guys, the key here, I mean, again, there could be a lot of specific concerns that we just will never be able to address. That's why it's best to approach this in a general dialogue and seeing where the magic can be applied. But one of the tips I would like to provide is, you know, I always tell people that you have to know yourself to avoid the game of manipulation. You have to really know those vulnerabilities. I would also like to say the same when it comes to policy and their vulnerabilities. You know, inmates are going to look at it, look for the loopholes. So you yourself have to kind of have that inmate perspective and look to see how else that policy can be read. Because the problem is the inmates are going to be able to take you down any hole if they know the policy better than you. So you have to go in there and part of that game, you know, kind of part of that game plan when you have the parties together, the different parties, is to really, first thing you do is let's read this policy. You know, let's just see what we have here and how does this apply to this behavior that we have going on that's forcing us to do the same thing every day, which kind of gives the inmate that level of control. And the reason why this is so important, guys, is remember, if the inmate is able to control and weaponize policy and procedure, then they're able to control the people that work at that facility, which means that if policy and procedures being misused and I go ahead and I just kind of, you know, without no game plan, just try to deal with the inmate, I'm walking into a situation where I actually have no authority right now. I want you guys to know that without any plan, because the reason why we're strategizing, the reason why I'm bringing the people together is my outcome of that meeting is to bring authority back to us. That's my game plan. So when we're having that meeting, it's so essential for us to come up with a game plan that we all agree to in an effort to give us back that level of authority. So when we go to approach that inmate, we at all times advertise that level of control and we are consistent with each other. I see you in agreement, Connie. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you just took the word from me. I was just thinking, I know we talk all the time about consistency, and I don't want people to think that we're losing consistency by coming together as a team. I think consistency in the policy and the way that we interpret the policy, but it's the how where I think we have some discretion. And I don't know if that's the right word to use because I don't want people to go too far left with it. But I think it's the how when you come together as a team in order for you to still consistently follow the policy and the procedure. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, is important to bear in mind, that when we come together in these smaller teams to figure out how are we going to approach this situation, the end goal is still for us to follow policy and procedure. It is the how we get there in order to actually get that achieve the mission, right? So, you know, I think that's one of the things I want to make sure that we highlight, is that the consistency doesn't get lost along the way. It is coming together in order for us to still get to the end goal, which is still in alignment with policy, but the how is where we have the ability to innovate.
Yeah, that's where the magic is. I don't know if you guys saw that thing, but Connie said I stole an idea. I said I could have stolen an idea. And then I also said I probably gonna have to go back and check on all our phone recordings. And then I realized she doesn't know I record our phone calls. But guys, the reason why I'm trying to put a levity to this conversation is I want people to stay to the end, because in the process, guys, there is good, valuable information here. And I think I still want to kind of, you know, show the lighter side of things, because I want people to know that even though we love this profession, we take it very seriously. I also think that we also have to have a sense of humor about ourselves as well. Connie touched on a serious note now. Connie touched on everything that was spot on, which is the magic of the how, the plan, the level of control that you need to stop this game. And guys, that is the end game. You got to stop the game, because it does hold a threat to our facility, because as I said, it controls our reaction. So this is not something that should ever be taken lightly. I mean, this is something that after a few attempts, you gotta get in. You got to come up with a plan, because if you don't come up with a plan, you're losing control of that facility for that time to this inmate. You know, so you want to have something that we all agree to, and you want to have something where we're together. And I'll be honest, it's also a good way to bring that connection back with all the different departments involved. You know, so it's great for us to kind of even if anything, just to have that sit down, right, Connie, and just have that discussion of, you know, bringing, you know, we're all at the table, guys. That means custody and civilians. We have to work together on this one. And I think that the more we do that, the more we see that we do need each other. Because if you notice, the approach I had was not a myopic approach. It was an approach that wasn't led by one department. It was equally led by all departments. That means that administration is not taking the lead. Medical, mental health not taking the lead. Custody's not taking the lead. We're all taking the lead together. Now, I will say this. When the plan has been decided and we react to that plan in an effort to protect the safety and security of our facility, we have to share in that level of responsibility, because we're not always all going to agree with that plan, because in the end, it's sad to say, as much as we try to say that we have the same end game, a lot of our liabilities are different. So so my liability, let me do my perspective, and I want Connie to give her perspective, because well, let's just talk about two departments right now. So let's talk about, so first of all, let me eliminate administration for a second, because they're the liability of everything, right? So at the end, you know, we need all departments to work together. So let's do it from the individual silo, from like custody, mental health, and medical, whatever it is. So when we have a concern, let's say an inmate manipulate in the, I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to harm myself, chest pains, whatever, just manipulate and move. Custody's liability is in that safety and security. You know, I got to maintain safety and security. This is what's happening. And technically in custody's mind, if they think that the inmate's crying wolf, sometimes they're good, but we checked on him yesterday. We know he's playing a game today. We're just going to go ahead and ignore it. And, you know, and obviously that's not the right reaction, because now you have Connie coming in from the medical side saying,
yeah, so we're saying we've got to make sure, if they're saying chest pains, that there's nothing truly underlying. So we got to do the due diligence no matter what. Someone says that they're suicidal, right? Mental health has got to see that person and assess their risk. right? And we've got to make sure all that stuff is documented, because God forbid we don't see them, or we ignore the chest pain, or we ignore that suicidal ideation that this inmate has expressed, and then they actually kill themselves, or they actually die of a heart attack. The first thing that they're going to be looking at is the health record. What happened? This person was just seen yesterday by a practitioner, and what happened? And what was the follow-up, right? What actions were taken? What was the follow-up, right? What was the status when you returned that inmate to their housing unit? And those are things that obviously we can't ignore, right? Because even if we don't do that, right? I think the other side to that is that you got the inmates who we know are highly litigious. The first thing that they'll do is say, hey, I was having chest pains. I thought I was going to die. They ignored me. All they need is the right attorney, the ACLU, you name it, some advocate to come and say, we're going to request their health record. The inmate's going to release it. There will be no problem with him releasing or her releasing her records for the whoever's supporting their claim to now escalate that claim. So there's so many levels, I think, of liability. First is inmate safety, right? Is the inmate medically and mentally stable? We want to make sure that's the case. But then there's all the other liability if it goes ignored.
Right. And I want to mention something, guys. Obviously, custody shares in the not just the safety and security, but obviously the welfare of the inmate. But our priority may be a little bit different. Our priority may be safety and security, would come first. And then obviously the welfare of the inmate. Am I 100% wrong with that? I don't think so, because if the scene's not safe, we're not going to attend to that inmate until the scene is safe, because that's our job. You can't provide any help to that inmate unless the scene's safe. Medical on the other side is going to be a little different. Medical's priority is they're going to run in, and their priority is the statement of that inmate, and they're leaning on us for their safety and security. So at that point, we're both coming in with these two different perspectives that we now have to bring together as one before we go ahead and even think about approaching that inmate. And the funny thing is that when the inmates decide to play these games, I do believe they're smart enough to know that some of these policies are written independently, which means that it comes down to the different departments separately, and never once are we actually working together until something really happens, and now we're live and in the moment, and then it's like, okay, custody's doing this, and what's medical got to do? I don't know, I'm not medical. Well, medical, what are you doing? And medical's like, what do you got to do? Because we don't talk enough to see where we interact. I mean, some facilities I've seen where you could see the flow, and that they're definitely training together, and some facilities it's like, definitely a little bit in a silo. But I believe that when inmates decide to play the policies, they do see the individual parts of the policy and where they can get in between. And sometimes getting in between is the two departments. Like, I know custody is going to do this, but I know if I say this to medical has to do this, which may supersede what custody wants to do. So now if me and medical aren't on the same page, medical now is going to push for something. I'm like, hey, medical, but if you do this, that's going to mess us up from doing this. And that's all the inmate in the middle just playing it out, right, Connie? If it's divided.
Absolutely. So I'm remembering a time. So back in 2000, I was just on Rikers Island and really just starting to learn the whole process. And I recall having this very so I had an inmate I had to meet with who was a sexual predator, and I was like, I felt uncomfortable. And so we had an escort officer who was literally standing right at the door, and the inmate started to complain, saying that, HIPAA, the officer can't be here. And I think at the time it was still very loosely being interpreted what HIPAA meant in the context of the prison or the jail. And so the officer was like, he didn't give a crap. He wasn't going to leave me with this inmate in there. And so I remember at the time, my manager kind of said, hey, Connie, I know you just had a situation. And it was because at the time, my clinic captain, he wasn't sure, like, so what was the interpretation of HIPAA in a jail, right? And did the officer have to step out or step away or whatever the case may be? And I think, things are a lot more clearer now, but I think the inmate knew that the whole HIPAA context in the jail was something none of us really had much experience with. And so I'm thankful for the officer that was like, nah, I'm not leaving, right? I'll stand here. I don't really care what you got to say. Say what you got to say to her. And it shouldn't be anything inappropriate anyway. Like it was one of those. But I feel like that's those opportunities where the inmate can try to weaponize, a policy or procedure, because we might not have all the information, or we might not be in alignment with what should happen. Most of the time the inmates really didn't care if the officer was there, because they were talking about discharge planning. But in this instance, this particular inmate has something to say, because he was a sexual predator and he was looking for an opportunity to have me alone. And so, of course, I was new, so I didn't really know no better, but I was glad that the officer knew more than I did, right? And so it was easy for me to go with the flow and say, no, he needs to be here, right? But I think it is those like little cracks or those spaces of ambiguity that, inmates know that we haven't quite worked it out. Like, I kind of feel like a major vulnerability is with the transgender population and how we manage them. And I think until we're completely all aligned, we're going to have folks weaponizing that ip, right? Like whether it's manipulating to get into the female facility or vice versa, or to be stripped by or searched by male versus female. Like, I just feel like that's like where we're headed when we talk about this context of inmates weaponizing some of the policies.
Right. I want to add on something on that. I guess this is kind of more of a specific when we're talking about the transgenders, but this actually could lead to something that could be applied for elsewhere. But just hear me out, because I want to lean on what Connie just said. So if you don't have, let's say mental health is the ones that see the inmates, and obviously they're the ones that give the proper diagnosis. Now, some mental health may say, well, I have no choice. How am I going to not prove it? So they go ahead and just kind of blindly give the diagnosis. Sometimes they don't realize what that causes the other departments to now have to do. So even just having that discussion at the table and letting them know, I want you to know before you commit to this, this is how this is going to affect the other departments. It may take them a second to kind of like, well, let me think about that before I do it next time. Because I really honestly believe, Connie, that when these departments don't talk and you have an inmate playing the game, sometimes when someone goes, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and just do this. And it's like, okay, but I want you to know when you do this, now that's going to affect A, B, C, D, and E of this department and A, B, C of this department. And it's like, well, wait a second. I thought this, again, we could be thinking in a selfish manner. I only thought this affects us and that diagnosis. No, guys, once that person's been diagnosed, now that opens up the door for this from custody, the possible transfer to over here of this. And it's like, oh, I didn't know all that. So I think that's great what you're saying, because I think that once you educate those other departments on the consequences of just blindly committing to an action that you're possibly being played, but it's safer just to say the yes, because I get the universal precaution. I get sometimes it may be safer to give the yes, but guys, these yeses, you got to challenge the inmate a little bit. You can't make it that easy. I'm not saying that, you have to say no. What I'm saying is you got to make the effort on your end a little bit more devoted, a little bit more dedicated, because the problem is that one yes that you're going to give, if it's that easy, prepare to give another one. That's a custody 101. You give out one yes easily, you better prepare to give out many of yeses. So
the ripple effect.
There's ripple. So what's your thoughts on, having that communication and letting the other departments know, hey, if you do this, I want you to know now you got us doing this.
I think it's actually it's critical that we are communicating with each other. I think also that we are open to learning from each other, right? So maybe from a clinical perspective, this is in alignment with, best practices, right? This is the standard of care. This is what you should be doing in this instance. I don't think it's too much to consider everything else that impacts behind the wall, right? Because those standards are typically based in sort of the community setting, right? Where you don't have all these moving parts that we might have in a facility. So not saying you're going to in any way, dismiss your standard of care. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying to compromise that either. What I'm saying is that we have to be able to understand what is the ripple effect down the way. If I do this, what is the outcome of that? I think about a situation where we had a doc who didn't want to put a pregnant inmate in handcuffs. It was part of the transportation procedure, right? But she didn't know the actual transportation policy for custody. She was only following her medical intuition, as well as what she thought would have been appropriate at the time. And so I think when we finally brought the policies together, right? So here's what the ACOG guideline says about, pregnant women and their gait and all this other stuff during the trimesters of their pregnancy versus the transportation policy. It was like, oh, okay. And then we were able to come to some agreement as to how we would be transporting those women who were in their third trimester, right? And so I think when we don't do that, right? So here it is. She's got a doctor's order that says don't handcuff, and you've got custody saying we're not transporting this person without handcuffing them. And so she missed her medical appointment, which was critical because she had a high-risk pregnancy. But there was no coming to the table at the time. The doc was like, no, I'm not writing that she could be handcuffed because she shouldn't be. And custody said, we're not transporting her because it becomes a security risk, right? Pregnancy, and now we've got the outside provider who's saying, well, you guys, this is money we're wasting, right? These are medical appointments that are, they're booked weeks, months in advance. And so they're in a space where they're losing money and they could care less about this internal battle we're having. But my point being that if we never came together to see what was the medical expectation and what was custody's transportation directives, we would have never known how to come to that midpoint to decide okay, here's the best course of action, because she wouldn't be the only pregnant woman that's there in her third trimester. So this would come up again, but we got to deal with it. And I think this is the way that we're going to start to grow and innovate, I think, as a team, that we start to look at, okay, so what's the policy here? And what is this policy here? And let's get all the right people at the table so we could talk about it and understand each other's agendas and perspectives. Not so much, I'm going to win, you're going to lose this battle. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at how do we come to an agreement that still protects the best interests of the institution.
Yeah, guys, and you notice besides just the authority of us getting back the authority, we're also fixing the loophole. Yep. So that's how policies evolve. And once we have the discussion, maybe there's little caveats that we can actually apply to each one of our policies. And hopefully there's probably a joint policy, but in some cases there could be individualized. But in that policy, you'll see maybe some wording that actually has some verbiage that is positive for all departments. Mm-hmm. I want to add something else that I think is important too. So admin, when they're at these meetings, how I would do it, and I don't know, I'm not everybody's, but here's how I would do it in my position is I am going to lean directly on the department heads on this one. So again, whatever the scenario is, whatever departments are involved, I want to hear their opinions because I believe they know their policies the best. Now, my job as a facilitator is where these policies interact. So I could see myself maybe getting involved only if these departments can't find that agreement because they're just resistant when it comes to that. So maybe
the difference. There's a major difference. So you're looking at yourself as the facilitator of that conversation, right? And so that's not lost on me that a lot of admin don't see themselves necessarily as the facilitator.
The authority of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, well said. So yes, thank you. I appreciate that. If I had a chance to type up James' approval for that, I would. But yes, that's a good point, by the way. So yes, I didn't realize that. But right. So my job is I'm going to sit back and see how they want to best decide it. And if I have two opposing departments, let me tell you, some department heads that should be the best at what they do. This is more of a personality conflict. And if I have to get involved with that middle road, that's bullshit, to be honest with you, because when you have the department heads and they're the ones that represent, they know where they can blend those policies. It's just we become so selfish and we only think of one thing. And then as the administrator, our job is to even out the playing field, because in the end, if it wasn't for us, it would be departmental survival. Everybody would do what's best for the department, and we're coming up and saying, well, we need to do what's best for the facility. But with that said, so I think, and guys, I believe this is the right approach, but I believe that if I lean on the department heads to solve this issue and kind of push the heavier weight around, that lessens the weight for me, which is a great thing, because technically I feel it's something that they should be able to help me out with. But it helps me get a bigger, more fuller picture of, are we all on the same page? Because here's the thing, guys. So when it gets to, let's say, my table, and it involves like this incident that involves all these multiple departments, you're going to have a lot of different policies and procedures that we're going to have to look at to see where the violations are. Now, if there is any in this plan. But if we're all together and all the departments heads have worked together and said, hey, guys, we could do this because this doesn't violate my policy, and from the medical side, this doesn't violate from the custody side. And now everybody gives me this complete picture. And I'm like, hey, guys, are we all good with this? Medical, yes, I'm good. We could do it this way because policy says this, but this actually works with it. Because don't forget, loopholes work both ways. But also some things about policy do give us some room to interpret. There's some wiggle room to interpret, and there's also fail-safes. Fail-safes, which, hey, if this policy doesn't work, you can go to this fail-safe. People that work in corrections know exactly what I mean. So we have interpretation and fail-safes. So how we interpret it is where we want to be on the same line with the message. So if I'm the administrator and I'm sitting in, I'm listening to this dialogue, and I say, hey, guys, if everybody's good with this, so basically what am I asking is, everybody interpretation of policy good with what we're going to have? That's what I'm asking. And if everybody's in agreement with it, I'm good. Because these are my department heads telling me we're good. They looked at their policies. They feel that we're okay, and we can go ahead and run this. Let's run it. Because, again, the greater risk is that we have to show a plan so we don't continue to get our policies misused and abused. And again, I still feel that if the plan is successful, somewhere along the line, you're going to want to adopt that plan into policy and procedure for all departments. And then, again, now, when the inmate goes to play that game, policy and procedure is going to challenge it a little bit more. But I believe, Connie, you have any thoughts on that real quick?
So I think, yes, everyone coming together and aligning on policy and procedure is important. For me, one of the things, so I sat on the policy and procedure committee for about 5 years. And one of the things that I want to say we were intentional about is that, so here's steps A, B, C, D, right? And so the intentionality is leaving some wiggle room for the provider or for custody to have judgment in the moment, right? Because sometimes the policies may be to the letter, and if you miss one thing, you're not in compliance with the policy requirements. And so the wiggle room, which there's the pro and the con, right? The pro is that it allows for the practitioner for custody to have that judgment call in the moment, right? Because maybe this scenario isn't exactly the way the policy was written. But I think being mindful that that same wiggle room is the wiggle room that the inmates are going to try to capitalize on. And so I think that it is key when you talk about us sitting at the table and saying we all align on this interpretation, right? Because then that means even though there's some wiggle room, there was some judgment, some this, some that, the third, we agree that this is the right approach in this situation. And so, I think that's a critical piece of something that needs to be happening if it's not already happening.
Right. And when we talk about interpretation, guys, it's easy to see violations of policy. It's harder to see how to work with policy, if that makes any sense. Like violations of policy are easy to see, I think, for the most part. Well, in comparison to kind of keeping the momentum of the policy going, I think violations of policy, trust and believe, for some reason, for people that know those policies, it's automatic. But understanding how you can work with something like that interpretation to how do we figure this out to make sure we don't continue to get played, that's where there's always going to be that bigger discussion. But the key is, again, is coming together, having that same plan, and then going ahead and making that approach, and then doing what you can to, I think Connie said at the beginning, is to stop. You know, I mean, you have to find a way to stop it. And believe it or not, we're not talking about attacking the symptoms. We're talking about attacking the foundation, because there's always going to be quick answers. Move the inmate out. But that's another facility's problem now. You know, you haven't stopped the concern because it doesn't stop another inmate from doing it. Hunger strike protocols. You know, I mean, that could lead to, you know, how you respond to that could start a whole mess of other inmates committing to hunger strikes, you know, because you could be that instant reaction from admin that now gets admin's attention. And now I want admin's attention, so I'm not going to eat. Why aren't you going to eat? Because I wanted a tomato today and they gave me cheese, you know, so I'm not going to eat for 6 weeks, you know, or what, I'm sorry. I mean, you know, but the thing is that your response to these concerns is what's going to open up the game. So it's great for us to get on top of it and look for the long term. It's like, yes, someone can come to the table. Maybe custody can say, you know what, I'm just going to get this inmate out. I get it. It's easy. It's quick, but it's not evergreen. It's not long term. You know, long term is, hey, we got to bring everybody to the table and say, hey, guys, how do we end this once and for all? And what do I mean by once and for all? It's not just about this inmate. It's about every other inmate now that's going to go ahead and employ what's been happening here, the Pandora's box. The Pandora's box. Hey, Connie, I thought it was a great discussion. But anything that you would like to say in closing? I know a big part of what we discussed was, I believe we gave some specifics, but, you know, I believe that even in the general, there's knowledge that could be applied. But just, you know, what's your thoughts in closing?
I mean, listen, I just feel like it is our responsibility to know the policies. We need to know those policies in ways, out ways, upside down, however way, because I know for me, like, I didn't come into corrections with sort of like that criminal mind. Like I didn't know how to, I'm like, they do what, like everything was so much of that. I mean, I'm not so, you know, surprised anymore, but, you know, it is definitely, we learn the policies, know the policies, and understand how those policies can be manipulated, right? And so, you know, sometimes that also comes with leaning on our colleagues who may have already had an experience with something, because even they can bring a perspective of what the outcomes were when they did X, Y, or Z as it relates to the policy. But so many times we feel like we have to be all knowing, and we don't. You know, we don't have to be all knowing all the time. You know, it is okay to defer to your colleague, your partner, another department, because the collaboration is where I feel like the magic happens, where we're able to stop the game, not for just that inmate, but for all the others who may want to copycat.
And you notice Connie said magic happens, and I said earlier today, because I love it, is the how is where the magic happens. That's because the how is what brings everybody together. So again, we all know what we do maybe independently, and we obviously better know why we do it, because that's the liability end. But the how is where we can become magical. And I love how that just came full circle, because the how is when we're all working together, and now we're going to put an end to this game once and for all. And again, without violation. Because guys, I want you, for everybody on the outside looking in, inmates that misuse policy threaten our facility every day. They divert manpower to maybe other concerns that we need to address. Like, imagine you get these fake PREA calls, but we have a real PREA going on.
Yeah.
You know, and an inmate faking suicide, but now I got a real suicide. You know, if we don't really control these incidences and really take some measure to deal with this manipulative behavior, because that's what it is, manipulative behavior. You know, the boy that cries wolf has to be answered, but eventually someone's going to talk to the boy that's crying wolf. You know, and someone's going to address that boy to make sure that boy doesn't do it again. Because why this boy, I know it's a metaphor, but hear me out. Why that boy's crying for wolf and there's no wolf, oh, there's a wolf. It's just not at this boy. But right now we're spending all our energy on this one kid, and there's another kid getting eaten. So the end result here is how do we work together to stop this bullshit that's being played so we can go ahead and continue to be effective at doing our job, which is providing safety and security to all, not just one, to all. So remember, when they play that game, all our focus goes on them 100%. Our eyes go to them. So if they keep on doing that all the time, then our eyes are on them and we lose focus on the real concerns. You know, I think it's a dialogue that needs to occur. And I wish, guys, again, this is just future forward thinking, but if ever there was, let's say, a person playing a game, like let's say a fake Priya or fake suicide, and that caused the attention to go to something fake while something real was happening, that person who did the fake call, whatever it was, needs to be held responsible.
Yeah.
Needs to help responsible for the whatever happens to the individual who really needed our help. And just food for thought. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Kept the show under an hour. Stay.